An Oscar-nominated movie on Screams After Midnight. What is this madness? Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley star in a satirical body horror film about the desire to turn back the clock. This is The Substance. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Hello.
This is a horror movie podcast, and we are back after Tim had to vacate several fires.
Yes.
So, but we're returned to the show, to the recording. He's not in his house again yet. In fact, he's moving house. There'll be a new house soon, but we have squeezed out some time to record some episodes. So we're here. We're going to talk about The Substance, which is one of the biggest movies of 2024. We're going to finally get into it, and we'll start spoiler-free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we do go into spoilers, and of course, if you're enjoying the show, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch if you do, and you can get bonus content, although it's a little bit late right now because of the recording gap, but there's bonus content for other shows as well as this show. I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode over on Patreon. So, yes, Tim, welcome back.
Hi, no, I'm glad to be here. Apologies if anyone had been waiting for a while. I know, obviously, circumstances out of our hands, but luckily, me and my family are doing well. It's just been very hectic with having to move several times, but we're in like a more permanent location now, and then we'll actually be moving to another location sometime soon. So schedule still might be wonky for a bit, but I think at least we're gonna have some stuff out right away, and then we'll probably be on somewhat of a normalish thing soon, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's like one person that was like, waiting with bated breath every week for a new episode, but yeah.
How dare Tim keep his family safe by moving away from the fire? I want Screams After Midnight. But yes, we're back. This was the next, well, it wasn't actually the next time we were going to record, but it was the next regular episode we had planned and we were going to do. And we had plans to do a couple other, like, we would have done Wolfman probably the week it came out. We probably would have done Companion the week it came out. They've been and gone now pretty much. We are hoping that we might have a review of The Monkey for next week's episode, but if it doesn't happen and it's something else, it's just because we couldn't make it in time, and we'll get it to it later on down the line. Yeah. But we're here to talk about The Substance, which was one of the more critically acclaimed movies. In fact, it's literally nominated for an Oscar, several Oscars even this year. So how often do we talk about a movie on this show that's nominated for Oscars? It can't be that often.
No, I mean, Saw 10 was the only one I could think of off the top of my head.
Okay, is that a joke, or was it nominated for one of the weird categories that, like, do you know how like Suicide Squad get nominated for like visual effects or something stupid like that? It's like, oh, technically David Ayer's Suicide Squad is an Oscar-nominated film.
As far as I know, it was not up for any Oscars, but I don't know. I could be wrong. So.
Why do you have to make a cute nickname for everything? Oscars is already the nickname for Academy Awards.
It's too long to say. Who has the time?
Oh, dear. So yes, The Substance, simple premise, a body horror movie about a sort of basically a procedure or a drug that allows someone to create a younger duplicate of themselves to kind of timeshare life with. So the story is about an aging actress played by Demi Moore who is starting to feel the pressures of growing old. She's just turned 50. I don't know how accurate that age is. I feel like she's actually probably a little bit older than that in real life, but
probably a tad, but
but in the movie she's just turned 50, and she feels the pressure to go through with this. And the movie is basically just about everything that happens once that goes through. There's a lot of subtext, of course, about how we look at beauty, how we treat women, specifically in Hollywood and in movies and things like that, and all that kind of thing. Although a lot of it does apply to just life in general, to be honest.
I think you're being a little kind when you say subtext. It's like very overt.
Okay, it's basically just the text, but there's some layers of subtext as well within the text. But
no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm joking, obviously, but it is Like I don't think it diminishes the movie.
It's not
at all,
subtle. Yeah. It's Paul Verhoeven and David Cronenberg got together and pumped each other, and this is the baby that came out. Although notably, the director here, if I could just get her name, which is Coralie Fargeat, I'm going to say that's pronounced, but forgive me if I've butchered that. We have actually done one of her films before.
Right, yeah.
We did Revenge a few years ago, which was a pretty decent little movie. Which also very much centered around the idea of how the women in the movie is treated by the men around her. So clearly some of these themes are definitely something she wants to focus on. But that felt like a very little movie that had some cool things in it and some style. Whereas this feels like, oh, she got like maybe a little bit of credibility from that to get bigger names, do something bigger and bolder, and literally is getting nominated for awards as a result. So kind of interesting to see that escalation from the last movie, which is about 5-6 years ago now, something like that.
Which I don't remember a ton about the movie, but I remember, liking it. But after watching this, I definitely want to go back and check it out again.
Yeah, I remember liking the movie quite a bit. Just maybe the middle being a bit slow was, I think, my main complaint at the time. But I definitely liked the carnage at the end, and I liked all the build up to, because for a while it's like, hey, this guy's brought his hot young girlfriend to this like weekend getaway, and it's kind of building for the first act until it escalates into a horror movie. Because for a while it's not. For a while it's just kind of going through. But anyway, this movie obviously is getting a lot of buzz. As soon as I heard about it, I don't know, in like October, September, whenever it was starting to like be a bit more talked about, it definitely sounded like something. I remember being a little bit conflicted when I heard the premise, because I thought, oh, that could either be horror or sci-fi, and it definitely does have a little bit of sci-fi because this substance exists. But the one thing that everyone said when they were talking about it in those early buzzy kind of like social media posts or whatever, is the phrase body horror just kept coming up over and over again, and it made me feel pretty comfortable that it was probably more of a Screams After Midnight movie. And I feel good about that decision after watching it. Once you get to the third act in particular, I feel like it earned the Screams After Midnight a slot. So but yeah, we'll get into it, of course, and we'll see how we feel. So Tim, how did you feel about The Substance?
So I was really excited to do this one. I actually didn't know too much about it. I knew that it had something to do with like an aging actress wanting to be younger, but I didn't really know exactly, like how that resulted. And obviously, like you said, it began a lot of buzz, and I'd heard people saying a lot of good things. Actually, I think I know at least one or two people that said it was like their favorite movie of the year. So I was pretty hyped going into it, and I think happy to say it really didn't disappoint for me. It's a very captivating film. I think Demi Moore does like a great job as this really interesting character, and you can definitely see like where her desperation is coming from, and it's like completely not her fault. Like it's obviously like, oh yeah, like we live in a shitty society where even this woman who is like stunningly beautiful for her age is like considered like, we get out of here, you old hag. And it's like, oh, like, okay, you're one of the most beautiful women out there, but sure. And yeah, I thought the performances were great. I wasn't expecting this to be as funny as it was. Like we were saying before, it's really not subtle with what it's doing, and I think that applies to a lot of things. Like the characters are very over the top, like especially Dennis Quaid, who's just giving this almost cartoony performance, but I think it works really well. Like it's very entertaining. So yeah, I was actually surprised like at the moments that I laughed, but then it doesn't skimp on the horror either. Like you were saying, body horror would definitely be the subgenre I'd put this in, and it does a great job of like just having some really like sick and inventive scenes that are really gross but very effective. And maybe if I have like a tiny complaint, like probably could have been like slightly shorter, which is very minor, like because I wouldn't say like I was bored at any time during it, but no, I was very happy with this watch.
Yeah, I do think the third act, well, I was really happy with almost everything it does in the third act. I do think there was like sort of little sections in between the main bits that could have been trimmed out, just to tighten it up, because this movie's 2 hours and 20 minutes long, which does, that is a long ass movie, especially for something I think with this subject. And I do think it maybe is a little indulgent at points and could have been tightened. But having said that, I do think it's very good, and I think the performances are great. I think the direction does a lot of really smart things with how it directs the scenes that Demi Moore's in versus how it directs the scenes that Margaret Qualley's in, right?
Sorry.
So yeah, there you go.
Oh, sorry. No, just quick question. Has she been in anything else, or?
Margaret Qualley?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she was in The Leftovers. That was the first thing I saw her in, but she was in...
I never saw it.
She was in that... What was it, that movie? I didn't like it, but it was Drive Away Dolls, came out like a year or two ago.
Oh, yeah, that was bad.
Yeah, that was terrible. Yeah, she was in that. Yeah. She was like one of the main two.
Oh, okay.
She had like a thick accent in that movie. She was doing like a thick southern accent.
Yeah, I thought she was really great in this, and I was just... Again, I really didn't know much going into this, but I was just really happy that they use like an actual just younger person to play the role instead of like doing like a de-aged like CGI thing or something.
That'd have been horrible. And I don't think she's meant to be literally what she looked like, what Demi Moore looked like when she was younger. I think it's meant to be kind of like kind of a new person, you know. Like, I don't think it's meant to just be because otherwise, like, why wouldn't people recognize? Like, wait, you look exactly like a young.
That's true.
Demi Moore. So, not that this movie has to be completely logical all the time. There's definitely some stuff towards the end where it feels like we've left reality for some moments, which...
Well, maybe, again, it's not like a big deal. Like, I don't want to gripe too much, but like the one thing that kept popping up in my mind was like, they're making it seem like she's so big and famous, but then like when they show what she does, it's like, all right, so does she just do like an exercise video like every day or something? Like it doesn't really seem to me like that would be the kind of thing that would be like so huge.
I think my assumption is that at some point when she was younger, she was also an actress and was in things. But I mean, I could be wrong though. But like, because I mean, the whole movie starts off with like a Hollywood like star, like on the Walk of Fame kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that she was also an actress, but like she also did this exercise thing, and the exercise thing's the thing that she kept doing regardless of everything else drying up. Like that was a consistent thing she kept coming back to until, of course, as we find out in the movie, at 50 that stops. To quote a line. But no, I think it was very stylish. I think the two leads give a lot to the movie in the way that they they like. I mean, Demi Moore like goes super vulnerable with this. Like, like there's full frontal nudity from her, and then all the effects and stuff when it does do the more body horror stuff and that kind of ramps up, I think is very good. Honestly, my only real critique really is just that it could have been tightened up. Like this could have been a bit under 2 hours, I think, without really losing anything super much, and would have probably made the pacing in the last. Because I think it's really weird actually. The last chunk of the movie I think is maybe the worst paced, but has all of the most insane stuff in it that is the most memorable things in the movie. It just needs a little tightening, but. Honestly, it's really hard to find many other complaints. It's definitely a little bit like, it's heavy satire, right? So it's going like over the top, and like you said, Dennis Quaid is super cartoony, and even the way they film him, there's always these uncomfortable close-ups where he's right in your face, and you're seeing like, actually, like honestly, the body horror stuff is obviously fairly disgusting, but to be honest, anytime anyone's eating anything in this movie, it's more disgusting than the body horror for the most part.
The shrimp scene with Dennis Quaid was like by far the grossest part of the movie.
Yeah, and that's not even a spoiler. He's just eating shrimp in a scene. Yeah. Like the context of the scene we'll talk about in spoilers, but like he's just sitting eating shrimp the whole time, and it's just like all over his mouth. It's like the slapping them, and fingers all covered in the sauce.
The crunch, breaking it up, and
jeez, and it all of it just sort of like parallels the idea of some of the sounds we're going to hear in the body horror stuff a little bit later. So worth saying. It's actually in some ways I'm kind of surprised after watching it that this is getting the Oscar treatment of like, hey, best picture, best actress, all those awards that it's been up for.
Yeah, and it's because I would say like this was kind of like a mainstream like hit. Like it seemed like a lot of, you know, quote unquote like non-horror people were talking about it, which to me is kind of surprising because it's like, yeah, it's like super gross. It's like really over the top. It's like, you know, kind of silly at times, and it's very yeah, like cartoonish in some ways. So it's definitely like not the what I would expect the kind of, you know, thing to break through to maybe like mainstream appeal or whatever. Which I mean, I don't even know if like if that's totally accurate. Like I mean, maybe it was just a movie that did really well that you know, like was still like mostly like, you know, like film people or whatever. But it seemed like, I don't know, I saw more people that, you know, were talking about this movie than normally wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of a few things. I think we're in a very different world from when something like Society was made, where
right, I think that's like an easy comparison.
Yeah, one of the benefits of, admittedly, there's a lot of negatives to the social media and the internet, but I think one of the benefits of it is that a movie like this gets to like be shared and get talked about amongst people in a way that spreads it that I don't think was possible back in the day. And I think the other thing going for it is just the idea that over the last decade, this idea of, and I know us horror fans don't always like this phrase, but the idea of elevated horror has become a thing in the last decade with stuff like Ari Aster's movies, Eggers movies, that kind of stuff. So, and add on to that some star power, and yeah, there's probably just some appeal of like some people see Margaret Qualley twerking her ass and go, oh, hey, we should go see that thing. Yeah. Also, the other thing she was in, because I was trying to think, because there was definitely some smaller roles she was in, and she was in Poor Things in a small role.
Oh, okay.
And she was also in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, yeah, there you go.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, that's stuff I've seen, but like, yeah, I probably wouldn't clock her off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But...
Well, see, I knew her from Leftovers, so every time she popped up in one of these things, I was like, "Oh, there's Margaret Qualley. There's Margaret Qualley." And then it feels like this past year, she's like, "Oh no, now she's getting starring roles." She was also in Death Stranding, which I'm sure you played because you're a Kojima nerd.
I actually I only played a little bit of it. I do love Kojima, but I could not get into the gameplay of that one at all.
But Tim, Death Stranding 2's coming. You're not going to be on the beach.
I don't know. I never do this, but this is like one of the few games that I'm like, you know what? I might just watch like a YouTube compilation of like the cutscenes or something, because it definitely has like an interesting like world and story and characters and stuff. So I kind of want to know what happens, but I just found the game to be so boring. You're just walking from one place to another. It's just yeah. But you know, I'll add that to the list.
I bet Kojima loves this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
This is the sort of thing this is probably him going, oh damn, is Margaret Qualley too big to get back now? Because now I want to hurt me and everything.
Well, I mean, no offense to Kojima, like I like him a lot, but it seems like there's not many movies that he doesn't like.
That's true. That's true.
But speaking of The Leftovers too, not that anyone cares, but I will watch that eventually. That's one I've had on like my queue forever.
That's like, I think we can say something more specific than that. I'm going to watch that someday.
I'm kind of just saying it as a mental note to me. I'm like, all right, I gotta watch that. I'll watch The Last of Us at some point. Any other HBO shows I need to watch?
I'm sure there is, but I mean, there's a bit of a broad spectrum. I don't know which ones you've specifically missed.
I'll try to give Penguin another shot. I thought it was kind of boring.
I mean, I like Penguin quite a bit, but I mean, I will say Last of Us is probably a little bit better than it, and Leftovers is better than both of those. But I mean,
okay,
you do what you do. I don't know.
There's a lot to watch. There's
a lot to watch. I bet you've seen some crap though that you've spent time on.
Oh, always, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not denying that.
So anyway, one of the things I wanted to point out actually is that it's not consistent throughout the whole movie. It kind of varies depending on the styles. But there's like right at the start of the movie, in the studio where Demi Moore, or I should say Elizabeth, makes her dance instruction show. She walks into this hallway, and immediately I was getting Kubrick vibes. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, yeah, because of the carpet. And I was like, no, even before I saw the carpet is very shining, right? Absolutely, that adds to it. But even just the walls and the symmetry and these clean orange walls going down either side in perfect like unison and symmetry, I was like, oh, that's a Clockwork Orange shot. Like this feels like a Kubrick shot. And there was a few scenes like that throughout the movie where I felt like we were. And what happened? I mean, I won't say what the context of the scene is, but what music plays towards the end of the movie, Tim?
I don't know the name of it, but
yeah, but you could just say what other movie it's from. We'll get the gist.
I don't remember off the top of my head. I remember recognizing it, but
it's from 2001, Tim.
Oh, right.
It's also a Stanley Kubrick movie. Is the point I was getting at.
Oh, sorry. I remember like recognizing when I was watching it, but I didn't jot it down.
Yes, I don't remember the name of it myself either. People will tell us in the comments, I'm sure. But you know, the bum 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 bum. That one.
Yeah. Brahms.
No, don't you sully classic music with your nonsense. Don't you dare sully Kubrick with your nonsense either, for that matter. But yeah, no, I wanted to point that out because that was one of the most striking things that stuck out to me early on was that. But then immediately you're sort of like met with these extreme close-ups of Dennis Quaid and then all the other things. And when it shifts to the Margaret Qualley stuff, like it's shot like either a music video at times. Sometimes it feels like there's literally a moment where she does like a Diet Coke commercial. Not the character's not actually in a Diet Coke commercial, but the way it's filmed, she takes a can of Diet Coke out the fridge, and it's like, you know, there's the close-ups of the cold, like, you know, I call it the Coke sweat on the side of the can, but like, you know, like running down the side of the can, she's taking a swig, and it's a close-up of her mouth going, ah. And I'm like, because that was, I mean, I don't know if it's still a thing, but for like 20 years, I swear the idea of Diet Coke, like in advertising, was like, show women loving Diet Coke. Diet Coke's for women. All the adverts have to be about how hot women like Diet Coke. That was the thing. And I feel like that's literally that. I think that was an intentional choice in this to show that, hey, she's living the life of a woman in a Diet Coke commercial.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's like a while where all advertising was just like, yeah, get a hot woman to.
Oh, sure.
Whatever you want. Yeah. There's like, hey, like, can you imagine like a hot woman eating fast food, or like a hot woman pumping gas or something?
Yeah, I feel like Diet Coke was like the peak of that mountain though, because it was consistently that for a long time. That said, though, like I sometimes I do have that thought when I see like you know, McDonald's or like a KFC commercial or something, and I'm like, there's like just like a supermodel eating like a cheese, and I'm like, you're not letting yourself eat this. Like you do not eat this on a regular basis. I refuse to believe it. You've got a strict regime, but it's nothing but vegetables and fruit. Yeah.
It always sounds so gross. Like if you hear about like actors when they have like food scenes and they talk about having like a spit bucket where like every time they take a bite and then they spit it out, it's like, well, it sounds so gross.
Well, it makes sense though, because like some scenes where they have to do like, you know, 20 takes, like if they ate everything in every take, they'd actually be like shoving so much food in their body, so they kind of have
like
to
5 hamburgers within like, you know, the span of an hour or something. I
do love the idea though that if like the actor's hungry, like on take 1 they won't do it, like in take 1 they'll just actually eat the thing, but then after that it's like, okay, I need to start spitting this shit out. I already ate a full burger, I can't do anymore.
I also think about like I don't know, at some point I feel like in the 90s or in the early 2000s they had like some special about like how they make commercials, and they talked about all like, you know, like food commercials and stuff, and how like all the stuff you see isn't the actual like food. It'll be like, oh yeah, and like to make it look extra delicious, we take like this like thing and then melt it to make it look like it's actually cheese, but instead it's like some prop or something that they use, you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh yeah, like those aren't really mashed potatoes. They actually took like styrofoam and glue and like, or whatever, you know, stuff like that. That's like, oh, like the stuff you're watching is actually disgusting.
I mean, at the very least, I expect them to be spraying the food in like, you know, like something to preserve it, so it's like hairspray. No, I wouldn't actually be hairspray, but something like hairspray which preserves the shape and like the look of it, so it's just perfect for every take. So it's unedible. You can't eat it, obviously, but but I mean, that phoniness kind of plays into this movie though, right? Because that phoniness is kind of what this is all about, is this idea of like, because clearly what this is talking about, before we even get to spoilers, we can say quite clearly that this is kind of an analogy on the surface level. The very first layer of what it's talking about is the idea that as you age, you do more and more things to your body to try and preserve the youth. The idea that, well, that's Botox, plastic surgery, pick whatever you want. But it's all about trying to preserve that semblance of youth for a little bit longer. And it keeps getting more and more extreme. And some people, of course, do ruin themselves by trying to keep chasing that to the point where they barely look human anymore. And that's a part of this for sure. It goes a bit deeper than that, of course, but that's very much the basis to start thinking about subtext if you want to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think on that level it does kind of like do that. And this idea that there's a cost to it every single time as well. Like nothing comes for free in genetics,
Oh, sure.
So, yeah. But yeah, there's that. The performances are good. The music is very specifically chosen. I mean, other than, what we've mentioned, there's a lot of like upbeat kind of dance stuff, particularly in the Margaret Qualley scenes because there's a lot of energy. So, I think all of the Demi Moore scenes are very like almost quiet and like there's just like almost a horror movie score at times, or it's just silence and it feels cold and empty. But with Margaret Qualley, at least in all the stuff early on with her, it's a lot of like upbeat, like dance beats and a bit of synth here or there, and it's kind of like, hey, so much life, so much energy, so much everything. If anything, if I was to compare scenes from this to the director's previous film, Revenge, I would say it's these early Margaret Qualley scenes because it reminds me of when the lead female character was introduced in that, because it was, hey, look at the hot babe getting off the helicopter and like all the eyes are on her. Like it was very similar shooting style to that, and I think that's very intentional. It's all about the gaze. And obviously a lot of it's a male gaze for sure, but I do think there's some critiques here as well about just how society in general looks at aging women and like expects beauty. Don't get me wrong, there's the scene in this where Dennis Quaid comes up with the shareholders and it's all old white men, so definitely like men are the main guilty part here. Don't mistake anything I'm saying, but we are all in the society, we are all playing a role in the society and the expectations. So yeah, like there's the obvious like show business stuff, but I always thought it was interesting too when you'd see like her interactions with like non-show biz people, like her neighbor or old classmates she runs into, like and the neighbor immediately when he sees the young hot like version is like, oh, I wasn't wanting to complain. In fact, can I help? Can I like do anything for you? I've got a big hammer. And what I thought like was really interesting, like when they showed like these other guys, like not to, like make fun of them or anything, but like they're not like, super hunky dudes, like the guys that like Sue. So sorry,
with, like,
Tim, as a non-hunky dude yourself, you're allowed to say it. It's fine.
But stuff like I thought it's interesting, like the neighbor guy, like he's not like doesn't look like super into shape or like the best looking dude, but he does immediately kind of feel like he's owed something from this beautiful woman, which I thought like was really interesting.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely like some commentary here about how the men treat her, how sort of artificial that is, and how sad it is that she even like craves it is actually also kind of part of
true, yeah.
how depressing this actually is at its core when you really stop and think about a lot of this. Is like you want this adoration, but it's so full. Like the executive at the start of the movie, Dennis Quaid's character, like we hear what he thinks of Demi Moore's character, and it's so nasty and just kind of just shallow and disgusting. And she's heard it as well, but when she hears the adoration he gives when he sees the young hot version later and does not knowing it's the same person, effectively, she's happy about it. Like she's delighted to get the adoration again. She's not like I would like to think that I would never want to hear a compliment from this asshole because he's a piece of shit, but instead it's kind of sad that she seems to still like it and still want it.
Or like or the story could be that this is how she gets her revenge by like getting this role as this young beautiful woman and then like screwing the guy over somehow, or being like, oh, I quit, I don't need this job or whatever. No, but that's not what it's about,
Yeah, honestly, I think the saddest part of the whole movie is that it never becomes like her like gaining power or her like taking control back. True, yeah. It never becomes that in any way, and that's a shame. But that's the point of the movie. It's not a cheery movie. It's a movie that I think if you compare it to like the Cronenberg, which I think a lot of people will, you could see a Cronenberg making this 20-30 years ago in some ways.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. And it's interesting because, like, yeah, I agree. It's not cheery, but it's also not like depressing. I think it's like because it's so like cartoony and over the top. It's kind of hard not to be entertained. I feel like maybe it doesn't make me like so depressed or something as like a more serious take on this might be. Even though I think it is still doing a really good job of like giving you a lot to think about and having a lot to say.
When I say it's depressing, I mean it's depressing when you actually think about what it's saying. I agree that when you're watching it, it does a good job of being upbeat and kind of darkly funny in places. But there's also scenes that do hit kind of hard. I'll talk about them in spoilers. But I think it's more like when you actually stop and think about what it's saying and what it's talking about, it's like, oh no, all of this is sad. There's not like a happy bit of subtext here. It's all, tragedy and like just. Yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, society's messed up, and this, we live in it, as a crappy version of the Joker once said.
Yes, of course.
And you're in California, so this is. I blame you. This is more your fault than my fault. You're part of the problem, Tim.
Oh yes, yeah. Me and my showbiz connections that are just upholding the status quo.
Anyway, so we have to get spoilers to really talk about everything. So we'll give the spoiler warning here, so you have been warned if you've not seen The Substance yet. We do recommend seeing it, so by all means go check it out before you listen to the rest of this.
You can stream it on Mubi. You can get a 7-week free trial for it.
Do you know what's so weird, Tim? This is the second time in just over a week I have seen the Mubi intro at the start of a movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I watched Perfect Days, the Wim Wenders movie, and that's Mubi behind that. And then this was also Mubi, and I'm like, wait, they're making like movies now. Okay, that's interesting. And not just like not just like straight to Netflix style trash like for their service. Like they're making real movies that are getting nominated for awards. So fair play. And yes, I know before someone says it, I know a couple of Netflix movies have been nominated in the past, but like. How many movies have they made that have not been nominated for anything?
Yeah,
most of them. Anyway, yes. All right, spoilers for The Substance. It's time. Let's do it. Daddy wants to eat, so let's get through this. Although I'll probably not want to when we talk about some of the food scenes because they're nasty. They're really nasty. So. Yeah, I mean, where to start really here? I guess actually, if I have not a critique, this is not a critique. I want to make it clear, this is not me saying this movie does anything wrong in this respect that I'm about to bring up. But I will say the one element in the first act that maybe felt a little bit, I don't want to say tedious, because it wasn't tedious. It was well done, it's well directed, everything makes sense in the context of how it's presented. But the one thing that felt a little, I guess... What's the way I put this? So I've seen a lot of movies at this point in my life where a character is invited to something or offered something, and we go through the process of them like sort of like giving into it and like sort of like going through whatever the process is to start off. So in this case, in this movie, it's like, okay, she gets this like invitation of like this USB stick with a little explanation of what the substance is. And she has to like call a number and then go to this address and like go to this lockbox and like the items are in there with some instructions, and it's like, hey, here's all the things in there. All of that process is perfectly solid in this movie, but I do feel like I've seen a lot of movies now where a character gets like a card or something and has to go to a location, and like I was like, okay, this is all solid, but like I'm really here for like what happens once we actually get to the substance. Like, the build up to it feels a little bit like, okay, I've seen this kind of thing in other movies, which is not to take anything away from all the solid stuff it does in that first act, because seeing her like set and her doing like a dance instruction show, and especially when you see like the set that Margaret Qualley gets in like the other part of the movie, where it's like this big high-tech lossy thing that looks like they've put way more money into it, as opposed to this 80s style looking set, which notably is when Demi Moore was young. Like, like she has the style that was popular at the time because it's cheaper. But her overhearing the executive talk about her and all that, and all the stuff that motivates her in the early part of the movie is all really well done. So yeah, what do you want to talk about from this like first chunk? I mean, I suppose just first off, there's like a whole montage of her star, like her star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame being made, But then as time goes on, the montage shows people stop looking at it, and then eventually it ends with like a guy just dropping his burger on it, so it's like smeared in ketchup, which is actually foreshadowing for how this movie's going to end.
Yeah.
So good luck with that. But
very Watchmen-esque.
Actually, yeah, kind of is like the smelly fish with the blood on it. You're right.
Yeah. So one thing, I guess, just a quick comment on that. I that did kind of make me laugh, just because I feel like a lot of times, if you're not, from around Hollywood, or like haven't lived there, visited there, or whatever, a lot of times when you see like the Walk of Fame or whatever, like in movies, it always seems like this glamorous thing where it's like, the roads have all like these stars' names on them, but then like in reality, if you actually go there, it's like, oh yeah, it is like a crowded, dirty street that like there's just like tons of trash and like people like stumbling over it, and like like some, and just like really random like names of people like you never even heard of and stuff. So
it's
I like the
the reality of it, because even in this montage you hear like roadworks at one point, and it's like, hey, this isn't this glamorous thing. The reality is that it's going to crack, it's going to get stepped on, it's going to get dirty, it's going to get all these things. So it's not even just a representation for aging. I mean, it is that, but it's also just the facade of like what you think this is versus the reality of what it actually is. This isn't meaning as much as you think it does. Like, this isn't an answer to your life's problems that you got a Hollywood star.
And this first chunk of the movie, I thought did a good job of like immediately sucking you in. Like, again, the direction, it's very stylized. I was like pretty surprised, because again, like I had heard that there's like some really cool body horror and gore and stuff in this, but I mean, I should have expected it from seeing revenge and stuff, but I like that the movie like had a look and style to it, and I felt like I was immediately getting sucked in, like when they would have like stuff like Dennis Quaid's character just like having those intense close-ups and a lot of choices like that. That's like, oh, this is already like just putting me in a good mood, just that like it looks different and is trying to
it feels like a movie. It feels like it's got style, and it's like, like I said, those Kubrick like style shots early on, like they feel empty and cold, like oh, she's alone in this hallway of her posters, and she has that shot where she literally walks past the posters and she gets older on each poster in the background. Like really stylistic stuff, which is cool. And then that, it's one thing when she's in a scene with Dennis Quaid and it's a close up of his mouth, because it's like, oh, it feels like he's talking on you and like he's right in your face. But the first time you see him is actually in the bathroom, and like the women's room's out of order, so she like just sneaks out of the men's room, and he doesn't know she's in there in the cubicle, so he like comes in and he's like right up at the camera at the urinal, and he's talking on the phone about how, oh, that old bitch is like past her prime, we have to get someone new and hot, blah blah blah, and he's saying all these things. I kind of like the idea that it's like, it's not just a physical thing. Like, yeah, obviously this idea of him being right in your face kind of represents just how big his personality is and how like much he walks all over you because he just controls the conversation. But it's not just about physical things. Like, it still feels that way even when she's like away from him, like hiding in the box of the cubicle, right? She's she's behind a door, she's not in his face, but hearing this is still going to feel like, oh, he's in my face, like he's all over me, he gets to decide all these things that like change the trajectory of what my life's going to be now. I have no say in it. Like, there's this sense of like, oh, he's smothering you, like even when he's not physically right in your face, he's smothering, and I think that's really cool.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I don't know, it just felt like, even though it's so over the top, it did like remind me of I feel like people I've known in real life. Like, obviously I'm not in like the entertainment industry, but like, I don't know, I feel like I have worked with like similar people where like you'll just hear them over the phone like having this like really obnoxious conversation, and like they just don't care, or like they just feel like they're being so phony to your face, and like they'll say some kind of like offhanded thing, but then like have a really cheery goodbye, like, hey, thanks for talking, like good to see you, and then where you're just like, oh, I hate this guy so much. So just really good job for him for just like having such like a slimy like gross character, but also I don't know, like being very like entertaining to watch. And I like how like annoying and gross as he is. Like I was kind of surprised there was never like a subplot with him, like like doing some type of like sexual harassment thing, like because
you were expecting a Weinstein like side to him. I mean, and I think it's like he probably does do that, but it's just not part of the movie.
yeah. So like I totally thought that was gonna come, and I just thought it was like interesting. That it's like, oh, they're not going there, which I was surprised by that. Like, not that like I wanted him to, but I feel like that could have been like an obvious angle at some point. But he's like just as disgusting even without having that to his character.
Oh, sure, yeah. Also, his his wardrobe, like the costume design here is very loud. We'll say that he's very colorful, in your face outfits as well.
And I forget if there's something that mentioned it right away, but for a while I was wondering if this was like a period piece. Like I was like, oh, is this supposed to take place in the 90s or something? Because like some of the stuff, like the show itself and some of the costumes like did feel like a little dated, but I mean maybe that's just trying to say
no,
that,
I mean I mean even in that scene in the bathroom, he's got a smartphone, like, so
okay, yeah,
so right away they established, no, this is and she used a USB stick for a TV, like there was a bunch of little modern things. Yeah, as I take off this jumper because I'm really warm all of a sudden, Tim, why don't you tell the audience about like her car accident and what leads her to the substance itself?
Oh yeah, so yeah, she's driving home and then actually forget how exactly she gets in the car accident. Like I know obviously someone hits her, but I forget like what she was doing. Was she just looking in the mirror or something?
Oh no, because she was looking. I can't believe you forgot this detail. The most important detail of the whole scene. She got distracted because she saw her billboard getting ripped down.
Oh right. Her
face is getting torn off the board, and she's like, oh, "My face!" Yeah. And then she gets hit by the car. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and then she gets hit by the car, and then she's in the hospital. Luckily, she's fine. But then, it's kind of like an awkward scene where like the doctor's giving her good news, like, all right, like you're fine, you're good to go, and like she just starts like breaking down.
Well, I think the beautiful thing about that scene is it's like, hey, in any context, someone who's been in an accident this bad where the car flipped over should be ecstatic that she's been told you have nothing wrong with you, like you've got no injuries, you're in a fine health, and yet she is just depressed and desolate because she's so depressed about like being old and everything else going on in her life. She can't even take the happy news that she's fine in this scene.
Yeah, and then and again, this is like kind of funny when like the doctor just feels so awkward. He's just like, oh, well, I got another call, I gotta go. See you later.
And the young doctor or nurse, he starts like checking her back and her spine, and he's like, "You're a good candidate. I mean, you're good to go." And he's the one that actually slips with the USB stick and stuff. And it's when she leaves the hospital, she runs into this like old school friend. And I say friend, I'm using that loosely. Like this is clearly someone who was in her class back in high school. And he's like, "Hey, I followed your career. You're still like the most beautiful woman." And he kind of, it's a little awkward in that he's like nervous, and maybe it's, he's not smooth or anything like that by any means. But he's like, "Hey, like, I like it would be great to catch up. So here, I'll give you my number." And he doesn't have a card, so he has to rip a bit of paper off of his like medical bill, and he drops it in the puddle, and like there's this dirty bit of paper. And she's nice enough about it. Like she doesn't like say, "Hey, get away from me, you disgusting loser," or anything like that. But she clearly doesn't really have any intention of ever calling him. She's just being polite about it as she can. But of course, this ends up coming back up later in the movie in a big way, which is cool. So.
Yeah, so I have a question about this. Are we supposed to like this guy, or I don't know. Like he's definitely not like as bad as like the other men in the film, but I don't know, there still seems to be like a little bit of weirdness about him, and I find it so odd that like he drops his phone number in like it kind of feels like he like forces his number on her, and then also like the fact that he drops in this dirty water and then like doesn't even think to be like, oh, let me break off a new piece of paper. Instead, it's like, I'm gonna give you this disgusting thing anyway, and not even like care about it. And
Yeah,
Like,
I think that was just meant to be like, oh, that he's just awkward. He's not thinking. He's nervous. That kind of thing. I mean, I think we're supposed to kind of be going through the movie from her perspective, and like to her, this is kind of unwanted in the moment. But later on, in comparison to everything else, it's like, hey, this guy still thinks I'm attractive. He's not looking at me and going, "You're too old now." This is, for all the awkwardness of him, this is a fairly genuine attempt at talking to her. So
yeah,
I don't know if you might necessarily like him, but I think certainly later on in the movie, I think you're meant to like realize, oh, hey, that was actually just a real person trying to communicate, even if it was, not the most perfect movie interaction you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, and I think there is something there though, where it's like, okay, even if maybe he is a nicer or more genuine guy than the other people in the film, there's still something where it feels like, all right, do you actually like her as a person, or do you like her because she's famous? Because like, even when like she calls him and stuff, he's kind of like, oh, I'm just shocked. And then you see his like text messages like, oh, like, I know you big stars like to, make a dramatic entrance or something like that, where it's like he's still relating. I
could see
the
that
idea.
I think maybe what I would argue more is that like you could say the negative side of this, which isn't even necessarily his fault per se, but it's he kind of like is lusting after her because he remembers her as because they were both teenagers, right? Back when puberty was rife and like they were in that part of their lives. You could almost argue that he is, he's still willing and still finds her attractive, but it's part of like a nostalgia thing almost for him, because it's like, hey, this was someone I was attracted to when I was in not my prime, but like, and he's, his adolescence. So you could say that in some way he's also clinging to the past by like coming up and like trying to make a move almost.
Yeah. And I feel like there's like maybe something there where it's like that kind of idea of like the, like the kind of guy that's like, oh, I'm a nice guy, so like she should like me. You know what I mean?
I think
kind of thing or something.
The thing is, though, I don't even think it really matters, because everything that plays out because of her like calling him later is really not really about who he is or what he is. It's more just about her willingness to try and like want to like try something, and then the tragedy that comes from her not being able to. We'll talk about that obviously properly later, but so I don't think it's that important like what this guy is,
yeah, like it's a very small part of the movie. I just found it very interesting, trying to think about like, what exactly is it trying to do or say here?
Yeah, I think it's just he's there to present her with an opportunity later, and it's not really about who he is per se, other than just he's willing to interact with her or be attracted to her.
Disgusting 50-year-old woman.
yes, because I've never looked at a 50-year-old woman and thought, oh, she's attractive. But to be clear, us cracking that joke though is not missing the point, which is that just because we're sitting going, she's clearly still very attractive. What's the problem here? And there's a lot of pressure that we are obviously not witnessing or seeing in the life of someone like this, and that's kind of the point here.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously something the movie's trying to say as well, where like, even if you're the most gorgeous woman in the world, like, like the business or whatever will still be like, no, I'm sorry, you're old. Like, yes, you are more gorgeous than like 99% of like people out there, but you're not, 25 or whatever.
Yeah, you're not the star anymore. You can't be the star. It's time to move on, kind of thing. So... yeah, because I think it's very easy to sort of like hand wave things away and say, well, just because I don't feel that way, like there's clearly not a problem. No, that's actually adding to the problem, because you're not accepting and acknowledging the actual problems that are existing just because you're not necessarily a part of it yourself. And maybe you are a part of it yourself sometimes, and you have to be able to recognize that if you are. But anyway, so she doesn't want to call the number at first. She ends up having like a really depressing night on her own, where she's sitting at a bar and she's just kind of getting drunk, and she's looking over at a younger couple who are like flirting, and no one's coming to talk to her, so she's just getting more drunk. So even though she threw the invite in the trash, she's like digging it out, and she's like, okay, I'm giving it a try. She calls a number, and gets the instructions to go to the box with the key card and all the rest of it. But ultimately, what we're here to talk about is like when she actually gets it and uses it, which
and wait, I'm sorry if I missed something, but did they mention like payment? Did she have to pay for this service, or was this like just an experiment?
No, I think she pays for it. I think it just glosses over the details of that. I think
Okay.
because she says I want to make an order, and I assume that there is a payment here. And conveniently for whoever does this, they have to keep giving her like re-up supplies to for all the other parts of the process. So
It's like every goddamn thing nowadays is a subscription service. Like you literally can't like just like there are websites where you go to buy underwear and you have to like make a subscription plan. It's like I don't need underwear every month. Like I just want to buy this one time. It's so bizarre to me. Now, how do you feel about the fact that like we never really get much information about like what this stuff is, where it comes from? Like, obviously, it's not the point of the movie. The point is what happens when you take it. But would you have wanted more explanation about who made this and why it's like so secretive and that kind of stuff?
I don't think so. I don't think it ever once even popped it in my head. It just didn't feel like it was important to the movie, so I never even thought about it when I was watching it.
I agree. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah. I think if the movie was more about like the conspiracy behind it, then fine. But it's really just it's about her. It's just not about that. It's just it's a plot device to have everything happen, and that's it.
Now this is a very important distinction. So when she gets the stuff, would you consider this to be a movie that has like specific rules? Because you love your rules in a horror movie.
Yeah.
Or would you consider these as more instructions? Is there a difference?
That's not the question I thought you were going with there. I don't think there's... No, I mean, there's rules. Like, they are instructions, but the instructions are just explaining the rules to us, the audience. But as far as we're concerned, there's rules to how this works. Which is simply, so to explain this, there's obviously an initial injection, right? And which was hinted at the start of the film, but the two embryo, like one embryo becomes two. This creates a duplicate, a younger, sexier duplicate. And this is all the stuff that I didn't know going in. I knew that there was like obviously a substance that led to a younger version, but I didn't know if she just transformed into a younger version or what. That's what
I kind of thought.
Yeah. Instead, she obviously writhes around in pain, right? And she kind of like goes onto the floor in a fetal position, and her back opens up and creates the duplicate, right? And the instruction video explained, oh, you're not two people, you're one. Although, what does that mean here? Is that more of like a philosophical statement than it is a literal statement of how this works? But so there's two versions. There's the old version, the original, the Matrix as they call it, and then the young version. And they have to swap backwards and forwards every 7 days without exception. And during the week, there has to be like an IV put into the one who's asleep with like a food supply. And they also have to like take the duplicate when she's awake, she's the one that's in control for a week, has to take stabilizing fluid, which she gets from the spine of the original. So she has to like extract it into these little capsules and then inject it. And so the syringes are kind of fancy and have like little like, dividers where it's like, okay, this is the one you take today, this is the one you take tomorrow, and you have to take it every day or you start to experience body malfunctions and things like that. So it's like, okay, there's some clear rules. It's like, but what happens if she chooses not to switch back? And that's something the movie obviously tackles fairly quickly once it gets into things. Because would you believe that the young hot version doesn't want to switch back at a certain point? The questions I was having getting into this though was like, okay, how shared is this? Like, do they remember everything that's happening? Like, is it literally the same consciousness when she switches back? And the movie makes it clear that's not exactly what's happening. It's more like she's split in two, and the new version like has her own memories, even though there does seem to be the odd little thing that kind of squeaks through, like there's kind of like flashes of memory or something like that. But it's not like, when Demi Moore wakes up again a week later, she remembers everything the young version was doing. Like, clearly there's some like moments of like, oh, you've been doing this, you've had someone over, or when Margaret Qualley wakes up, she's like, oh no, you've been just eating for a week, like a slob kind of thing.
Yeah, it kind of, I guess it probably ends up being like physically they are one, because like yeah, what you do in one body affects the other, but mentally it seems like yeah, two very different people. Yeah, because if it was just one, consciousness where you're sharing the memories and stuff, it seems like they wouldn't be as combative. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's not the case.
Yeah, it becomes kind of a rivalry. But yeah, this first time she transforms, like she takes a stabilizer when she starts to have a nosebleed, but then that seems to fix it. So Demi Moore's body's just lying there on the bathroom floor for a week. Well, she goes out and she gets to do stretches she's not been able to do in years because she's young. She goes to the audition to replace Demi Moore, right? So Elizabeth was the older version. Sue is the name that she takes as this younger version. And she goes to this audition, and there's some foreshadowing here as well, which is really great, where whoever's before her, like we don't ever see her face, we just sort of see the two judges kind of like be like shit about her, like after she leaves, like, oh, it's a shame, like her boobs aren't on her face instead of that awful nose, and that's actually kind of foreshadowing of the the monstrosity that we get later on at the end, but. Yeah, she gets the job. Dennis Quaid loves her when he sees her. He thinks she's like this hot new star. Like they're going to promote her. They're going to give her a show. All of that.
I love how like instantly in love he is, and like just the difference between like the way he treats Elizabeth Sparkle like earlier, where he's obviously like still nice to her, but like is very dismissive of her. Whereas like Sue, it's like he'll do anything, even when she has like this weird demand of like, well, I can only film every other week, and he like gets like very serious. At first I thought he's gonna like scream or yell at her and be like, no, you'll film when we tell you to, but instead he's like, we'll do whatever it takes, we want you. Like, I don't care, like whatever sick family member you gotta take care of, like that's fine. It's like, oh, like he's like bending over backwards to do anything for her.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like, hey, it's easy for her to feel powerful and feel wanted in these scenes. But this is the truth of it, though, is the second you're not this hot babe that they want you to be, that attention stops. That consideration goes out the window, and all of a sudden you're a burden to them, and they'll get rid of you as quickly as they can. The respect that you're earning here shouldn't only be you shouldn't accept it because it's only been given for like selfish reasons, for artificial reasons. That as soon as anything changes, that's it. You're gone. As soon as you're a nuisance to them, you're gone. Like there's all these, because even this scene where it's like him at his desk, there's a couple of guys in suits that are also standing around. It's like there's just constant scenes in this movie where a woman is judged in a room full of men. There's an example later on when Margaret Qualley like has the weird moment where she's doing the video and like she has something happens on her ass, and it turns out to be kind of like a dream sequence as they're transitioning, where like Demi Moore wakes up, or Margaret Qualley wakes up. And it's basically because Demi Moore's been like stuffing her face with food because she's just too depressed to do anything else during her week, that she's having this nightmare during the transition of like, oh, what if I get fat? And she has this nightmare where she pulls like a chicken like leg out of her belly button because it's like appeared as a bit of fat on her ass, and she kind of like moves it up. But there's a whole moment here when she gets terrified because she thinks it's been seen on camera, and all of the men in the room who are making the program all just stand around the monitor to watch it, and she has to run away because she can't bear to watch them see this if it's there, Yeah,
I actually thought it was like really funny how like, I feel like in real life, they would just be like, oh, something weird happened, let's just keep going forward or whatever. But just like how they kept focusing on it and be like, let's watch this frame by frame.
Yes.
It made it like so nerve-wracking. But it's really interesting though, like a lot of these scenes where it almost like kind of like makes you as like the audience feel like a little complicit, because like some of the scenes will be very what's the word, like kind of like cheesecakey, where it's like really focusing on the girls like dancing and like shaking their butt and stuff, and and it's like kind of really wants to like focus on like like look at how attractive this person is. And I don't know, I thought that was just kind of interesting, and like it makes you feel like, oh, like I feel like I'm like leering, which while you're watching the movie it's like, oh no, that's like what we don't want to do. Like we don't want to judge women just by their appearance and stuff. But
the director's forcing you to do it because we've got the camera right in her eyes. And so, obviously, there's a lot of movies that do that, and it's unjust. But here, it's part of the theme. It's part of the point. But yeah, like she's twerking and she's doing the video and she's yelling and contract and contract and contract. And of course, one of the side effects of all this is that they put a billboard for this new show right outside of where Demi Moore lives. So when Demi Moore comes back, she just has this constant reminder of the young version that's doing better than she is. And like one of the only notable things that happens on her first week when she comes back is that she goes to the office and she's like given her box of belongings, and Dennis Quaid gives her like a, hey, we all chipped in and got you something as a going away present. Now goodbye, off you go, I have to run. So she's just discarded, but this new young version is just taking everything from her, and that's like a running thing.
I'm curious, I'd have to go back, but whenever she has I mean Demi Moore, whenever she has a scene with Dennis Quaid, does she ever actually talk? Because it always feels like she's being talked at, but I don't know if she ever like actually responds.
I think you might be right. I don't know if she ever does speak to him.
And like versus like the scenes with Sue where she has like back and forth with him, and like she actually like talks to him.
Yeah, I mean not exactly in-depth conversations, but yeah, she does say something at least.
I just thought about that now. That's interesting.
No, you're right. He just always talks at her, and she stands there quietly, or she sits at the table quietly, or because it's only those two scenes really. But yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And of course, the second time that Sue's in control, Margaret Qualley, and she's having a great time. She's walking in the sun with her silly little skirt on, and like the camera's like pointing up at her with the sun like beaming behind her. Like they really go out of their way to give it this music video style feel. She ends up going out on her last night, and knowing that her time's running low before she has to transfer back, she gets all like dressed up in like a cat suit and heels, and she ends up coming back with a guy, but the time's running out. Like the food supply that's hooked up to Demi Moore is like going away, like she's done. And we get this insane scene where she starts to have a nosebleed when she was just about to start having sex, and she runs to like extract more stabilization fluid from Demi Moore's spine, even though she's supposed to be switching. And they were told every 7 days you have to switch, but she steals an extra few hours and doesn't switch until later that night, until after she's had sex. And when Demi Moore finally gets up, her finger has like changed to like a sort of but obviously, like I'm saying this because of what she looks like later, but it's kind of like an old witch's finger, where it's like went all craggy and disgusting, and she's like freaking out. She's not happy about it. She calls the number and says, "Hey, fix this. She took too many hours. She was late." And it's like, "Hey, what's been taken can't be given back, but just keep the balance and it won't happen again." But of course, that's the big problem, is that the young version keeps wanting to steal more and more time.
I weirdly emphasized with the the guy on the customer service where that's like reminded me of so many jobs I've had where like people just call and they're like, "Hey, why did this thing happen?" And it's like, because that's literally what we told you would happen. Like, if you don't want it to happen, like, don't do this again. And then they call back, they're like, "I need more of this." Like, we, like very specifically told you. That just reminded me of like so many customer service jobs I've had where I had to talk to people on the phone like that.
I totally get it, although I do think the guy in the phone here is intentionally very kind of like cold and like doesn't give a shit. They're definitely going for that as well. But yeah, I get where you're coming from though, because people suck. So
in this instance, though, I mean, it is like a much weirder situation than like calling to complain about like a banking fee or something like that.
Oh yeah. But yeah, we see her like like freak out a little bit about this and not be happy about it. And it's during this portion where Elizabeth, the old version, like remembers, like, because she's feeling really down on herself. She's maybe like stressed eating quite a bit, but she sort of realizes, hey, I remember that guy who actually just wanted to give me his number, right? And that he actually was interested in me. And she has this whole sequence where she decides to call him, and he's very nervous on the phone. He's in shock that she's actually called him, but she actually wants to, like, hey, I can still have my life. I can still go out and do things. I'm not just going to like hold up in here because she's younger and prettier. I can still be something. And we get, in some ways, this might be my favorite scene of the movie, which is her getting ready to go out. She's agreed to meet this guy at like some bar or whatever at 8 o'clock. And we see her get ready at the mirror and she's getting ready to go out. But then, just as she's getting ready to go, she kind of like sees Margaret Qualley's like, you know, like not dead, but like sleeping naked body lying there. Because actually, one of the things that happened in Margaret Qualley's last section, which we kind of glossed over, is that she did like a whole DIY project to like make a hidden compartment in the back of the bathroom to hide the sleeping body for whoever's like not, because she wants to bring people home, and like she can't.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, she can't have just this naked woman lying in the floor in the bathroom. That would be a bit strange. So, but she sees Margaret Qualley lying there, and she like decides to start adding more makeup. And it's like, oh, this is a little bit sad. She feels that she has to compete. She doesn't look good enough. And then okay, I'm ready. She puts on her coat. We see the clock. It's getting closer to 8 o'clock. She goes into the main room. She's getting ready to go. She puts her coat on. And then she looks over at the billboard. And she feels self-conscious again. And she cuts back to the bathroom. She's at the mirror. She's wiping off the makeup. And she's adding like new makeup. She's starting from scratch. And one of the things I liked about this is not only the tragedy of her never actually making it to the date because she keeps second guessing how she looks and doesn't think she looks good enough, which this feels like sort of thing that a lot of, I imagine a lot of women who are over a certain age will probably sympathize with this feeling that she's going through. But the fact that, and this is a great touch, is that every time she like does the makeup again, I think she does look worse each time. Like it's like she's trying too hard, and between like how they've applied the makeup, how they've lit the scene, perhaps like they keep making her look a little bit worse each time she quote unquote tries to fix what was wrong to look better. And I thought this was a really effective scene where you really get into her mind and like what was driving her to just just keep looking worse effectively, but she was trying to fix it. And there's obviously it reaches a point where she starts like just wiping it all off aggressively and smearing it around because she's just distraught that she can't get it right.
Yeah, no, that's a really good scene. Just you can just feel like the frustration on her, and again, I'm still not like super convinced like how I feel about this guy, but it is sad when you start seeing the text messages. Is like, you know, hey, you're running late, like, you okay? At first it kind of seems like, I bet you just want to make a dramatic entrance or whatever, and then it kind of starts to seem like a little sad. And I was expecting that like it was going to lead up to like an angry message like, oh, screw you for leading me on, you bitch, or whatever, but it never actually goes there. It just, I mean, maybe he does later on, or who knows, but from what we see of the messages, it just seems like he's a little sad and concerned about her, which makes it kind of, you know, heartbreaking. Yeah,
it's just kind of because she just sort of doesn't even look at the phone. She just kind of sits there depressed. It's really sad. And of course, next time Margaret Qualley's in control, she ends up like stealing more and more days because she's enjoying herself too much. So she like keeps saying, "Oh, just one more day, and I'll switch back," and she keeps doing it to the point where it's like, and I think this is actually one of the greatest things in the movie about like the suspense is like, we know that her finger changed because Margaret Qualley stole not even one day, just a few extra hours before she switched back. What's going to happen to her body when, you know, I think by the time she switches back, it feels like a whole week's went past. It's like, oh, what's she going to look like? What's going to happen? And it turns out like her entire arm and leg have went all like gross and like old, like witch-like, and like half of her face looks kind of weird, and she's got grey hairs now completely like came in. And she looks very different. And it's like, hey, this is the price of this happening. And when she calls the number to say, hey, she took an extra week, we have to control her, the voice is like, you can stop, but you can't get back anything that's taken. Do you really want to stop this? And she still can't say yes. She still has to like not give up this idea that there's a younger version of herself succeeding and getting this job and getting offered these big things that's happening to her. It's really sad, actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and it's around here where she starts overeating and all that. There's a really funny scene where she's like listening to like a late night talk show that Margaret Qualley's done, talking about the fact that she's getting this New Year's Eve show that she's getting to do for the TV network, and she's like getting mad and like getting aggressive with the food she's trying to make with the cookbook that Dennis Quaid and co bought her as a present, and like she's like stuffing her hand in the chicken. And when Margaret Qualley starts making fun of her and says, "Oh, I never watched the show that was on before me, but my mum liked her. We're not exactly the same generation." And then eventually when the guy's like, "Hey, what's your secret of being so beautiful?" And Demi Moore's like, "Go on, tell him your secret." And she's like, flashing the TV practically. She's like, "Oh, I just try to be a good person and be thankful for what I have." And it just enrages Demi Moore to the point where she tries to cover up the window in newspaper so she doesn't have to look at the billboard. She's throwing eggs at the TV screen, the whole thing. Which reminds me, actually, because that made me think of the embryo splitting up at the start. One of the effects I liked when they were splitting up originally and Margaret Qualley was born, quote unquote, was the eye effect, where you see the two eyes inside the one eye. Oh, that was really cool. Or the two irises and whatnot.
I got like, I don't know if you felt this, like, I guess more so towards the end when it's getting really monstrous, but it did like remind me of Resident Evil a little bit. Like, it felt like the Birkin mutation.
I was thinking about Elisa Trevor actually with the with like how she actually looks at the end. With
that's a good point.
With the Eliza Sue Monstro or whatever they called her at the end. But yeah, it's after this though where Margaret Qualley's like, "Oh, this is disgusting what she's been doing when she's awake. Like all this food that's lying around, she's been a slob." And Margaret Qualley's, Sue just decides, "That's it, I'm not switching back." And she goes in with jars and tries to take out all of the fluid from her spine that she can. And just is like, "That's it, I'm just going to live off this." And the time skips 3 months. And it's like, holy shit. Like, what's going to happen if Demi Moore comes back? But, of course, the fluid runs out. There's no more stabilizing fluid. She has to switch back at a certain point.
Yeah.
And she calls the number when she starts having a nosebleed. It's like, "Hey, what's going to happen?" And the guy's like, "The fluid only regenerates if she's awake. You have to switch back. Like, this is it." So, I mean, how are you feeling with the build up to the reveal of what Demi Moore was going to look like after this 3-month time skip?
Oh no, I mean, I think they do a good job of foreshadowing it enough where, you see the smaller time increments. It's like, does a little bit more and a little bit more to her body. So it's a good anticipation of being like, well, shit. I mean, after this much time, like, it's going to be crazy. And of course it's nice that you have like the little, ticking time bomb of needing to be like ready for New Year's Eve for that big TV special that she has. Yeah,
it's like the day before that at this point as well, I think, as well. We're really like, it feels like the event we're building up to.
So it's like, even if she did say, "Okay, well, let's do like another 7 days where we switch back now," you can't really do it because you have your big thing tomorrow.
Yeah, and when we finally see her, when she wakes up, and obviously adding to this is there's a guy that she's got at the house that's like sort of living there. He's like wondering what's going on. When we see Demi Moore, she is turned into like what you expect like an evil witch to look like in like a dark fantasy movie or something.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it, but did you ever see... I think it was like that 80s movie, The Witches, where they turn the kids into mice and stuff. And
I have not, but like I think I know it's the sort of look you're trying to describe, because like, yeah, it's like the hunchback, the the hair's all kind of mostly falling out, like
like it
proper grisly.
Yeah, like it's not just like like the kind of witch that's just like, oh, a woman with like maybe long scraggly hair and like a black cloak or whatever. It's like, oh no, this is like a full on almost like Evil Dead kind of monster or something. Like it's so grotesque, but kudos to Demi Moore for she's already putting a lot into this character beforehand, and being very vulnerable in different ways, but now she's going like all out and like doing this complete like monster performance, which is great.
Yeah, it's I think what's great about this part of the movie is that she phones the number and says, "Hey, I want it to stop. This is finally enough. Like, this needs to end." And like, "Okay, that's fine. We'll send you the final like batch." And it's like it's basically like a syringe with like poison in it to kill the duplicate. And she like drags Sue into the main room. She's going to kill her, and she hesitates, but it starts to do it. Gets like maybe like the syringe half the way down, but then decides she can. And it's really sad because it's like, she's almost finally ready to accept that she can't be young anymore, effectively, but can't do it. like looks over at the billboard, which is turned into a billboard specifically for this New Year's show, and she's like, I can't, like, I still need you. I need you to like be successful and be what I can't be anymore. It's like this is the real like true moment of tragedy, is that even at this point, when this young version has robbed her of everything she did have, because a big part of this movie, of course, is that at the end of the movie she would be begging to look like she did at the start, like, you know, to look like she's supposed to look, and not this like truly deformed version. So she decides to not kill her. She runs to she tries to give her like CPR, and then runs to like the transfer like needle and whatever she uses, and she basically tries to switch back at this point, which, because she's not done it properly, they both wake up, because Margaret Qualley wakes up, Demi Moore's still awake, and they see each other. And when Margaret Qualley looks down and sees the termination syringe, which says terminate on it, so it's very clear what it was, she starts fighting and beating the shit out of Demi Moore's witch character, who, you know, and we should mention, like, her knees have got like big bubbles on them. She can't bend her knees properly. Like, it's a shock she was even able to get out of the house. In fact, one of the funny bits is that when she does like sort of wrap herself up in a bunch of scarves and like a shawl and all that, is that the neighbor is trying to come out to flirt with Margaret Qualley, and Demi Moore just yells "F off" at him, like, and really like loud, and it is a really funny little moment amidst all of this crazy stuff going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's surprising how violent it gets. Like, Margaret Qualley starts like bashing her head off the bathroom mirror.
Very bloody.
Yeah, she basically kills her by the end of this, and Demi Moore dies, and it's like, well, what happens now that the original's gone? And it does feel like, even if Margaret Qualley gets to experience this New Year's show, that she's not going to make it much past that, because she can't get any more stabilization fluid from Demi Moore's spine. So it's like, okay, so this is basically just you having your one hurrah, your big moment of stardom before you die, kind of thing. But of course, the movie doesn't even give her that, does it? Because when she's at the rehearsals and all that stuff's going on, it's getting ready for showtime, she starts to feel weird, and she goes to the bathroom, and just to get even more body horror out of all this, she starts, like, you know, pulling her teeth out, her fingernails start ripping off, her ear falls off at one point in the elevator, all super grisly. I had to look away for the fingernail part, because that weirds me out.
No, there's a lot of stuff here that I don't think I ever really like fully looked away, but definitely parts that made me wince. I was like, ooh, that's not pleasant to look at. But I mean, this, you know, special effects and everything looked so great during all of it. Yeah,
obviously, like the body horror part's one thing, but it's when she's trying to get away after her teeth have fallen out, where she's going down the hallway and Dennis Quaid's character like sort of says, "Hey, you come meet the shareholders," and she has to kind of like not open her mouth. And it's interesting because you pointed out that when he talked to Demi Moore never spoke to him. In a weird way, this has forced her to be like that because she can't speak to him. But what's so great about it is that, you know, he literally says that, "Oh, why aren't you smiling? Give us a smile." And she kind of forces a smile without opening her mouth. And he's like, "That's it. Beautiful women should always be smiling." So, you know, again, it's not being subtle. It's really hammering home like what it's talking about here. But really good.
And I think you mentioned it before, but I like, at this point, he's just like surrounded by like all these like old, like, you know, rich dudes. But I was thinking there's like something funny about that it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, like, for this business has so many opinions on, you know, what a woman should look like, and like at what point a woman is like past her usefulness, and then at the same time it's being run by just these like ancient and decrepit like people. Like, all right, like, why does this 70-year-old male stockholder have any say with, like, you know, like how old a woman should be or whatever? Yeah,
there's not a single woman in charge of anything here. So she somehow gets home, and this is where I think the movie kind of like, it's like how much of what happens for the rest of this really happens, or is it just like in her head and she dies, whatever. I don't know, because it's just so absurd. But like, that's not to say that it's bad or that it's not exciting, because basically Margaret Qualley rushes home and tries to like take whatever's left of the original like substance to create a new, better version. And of course, I'm thinking, but like, you're not like an original person though. You're already the copy. So what is the copy of the copy going to be like? Right? And of course, that's what they play on, because when this thing comes out and they hide it for a minute and we finally see it, it's this super deformed monstrosity where like Demi Moore's like face is coming out of its back. Margaret Qualley's a little bit there in the front, but it's this, you know, grotesque, like super, it's like a monster from a monster movie. It's like full on stuff.
I mean, you mentioned it earlier, but this was like where it started giving me Society vibes.
Yes.
It feels less of a person and more just like a blob of body parts, like in places where, you know, body parts shouldn't be.
One saggy boob just sort of hanging there. Yeah.
And then I thought it was such a funny visual though to have, like this monstrosity, but still, you know, trying to wear the dress and then like stapling the, you know, a picture of I forget, was it
it was Demi Moore's character? Yeah, it was from, because during the fight scene where Margaret Qualley was kicking the shit out of her, like she threw her into the big portrait and smashed all the frame of Demi Moore. Yeah.
But then it's just such a good visual though of like this monstrosity with just this, you know, like little poster or a picture or whatever like taped over their head. Yeah,
she's basically determined to still do the New Year's show. And they kind of play this thing where like the picture stapled to her face works, and it convinces people to let her in the building, because this is why I say it feels like we've left reality at this point.
Yeah, that's like, if it is a dream sequence or something, I guess that would be the biggest indication of me, because unless it, like, the one way I was maybe trying to justify it is like, I don't know, like it looked kind of like a weird angle he was looking at her, so like I don't know if like, are they trying to say that he just like looked real quick and just saw like her enough in the shadows, or
because the scene right after that is her walking down the hallway and there's people like clapping at her. So it's like, there's no way. Like it feels like we've left reality. But and also the fact that like all the dancers in this like New Year's special for TV are all topless. Like, really, they're airing that? Like, it feels like there's just a lot of details that are.
That's a good point.
Just we've left the real world and we're just like doing kind of this like metaphorical ending now, which is fine, because it's like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I do think there's a couple of things that feel a bit drawn out. Like, I don't know if I needed to see how she got in the building. I think we could have just went straight to the start of the show where they have the 2001 music playing and she comes out. You know, I think we could have skipped some of that and just went straight to there. I think we could have maybe not I don't know if her on stage had to be as long as it was, with like her spraying blood over everyone and stuff like that.
Yeah, it feels kind of weird to say this as, you know, horror movie fans. This is the most horror part of it, but it does feel like it could have been cut down.
Yeah, like I love like the reveal of what she looked like. I love the reveal of her like deciding to put on the dress and still try and do the show. And I love like the reveal of everyone reacting to her initially, but it does go on quite long, where she's like, on stage and like people are screaming, and you know, it could have been cut down. And I love what happens after. I love that when she gets outside and she's walking on the street, she just falls over and splats like a big pumpkin. It's like a wonderfully satisfying effect. And then the idea that there's just like a face on a bit of like flesh that's crawling now, like it's just a face that's crying in pain. It's just, you know, even though it's like it's almost like something from like that story in Creepshow 2 with the monster in the water. It's just a massive like of flesh with the face screaming on the back of it, just crawling. And of course, the ironic ending being that it ends up like lying on the star, the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And it's like, okay, it's like this ending's perfect. This is exactly what the final shot should be, because then like overnight, this blob of flesh that has finally died, like fades away, and it just looks like the ketchup over the star again. It's just this stain on top of the star, and the movie ends with the cleaning thing, whatever you call it, coming over and cleaning it, and the star's left, and she's gone. She's just not a thing anymore. All that's left is the fake star that somehow representing what she was the entire time.
Yeah. And let's not gloss over the fact that she does like throw up a boob.
Yes, we can't gloss over that. Yes. But Joe, I loved that there's like a little girl dressed in the same blue dress, like a fan of hers in the audience, that was okay to look at all the boobs that were like on stage with the dancers. But as soon as the boob was thrown up out of her mouth with like a tendril behind it, which boobs don't have tendrils behind them, that's weird. But like the mum covers this little girl's eyes, like, oh, you can't be seeing that. That's too much. But you know, it's kind of that idea of like, because I almost thought they were going to keep the thing going where no one reacted to what she was, like this idea that it's all fake anyway. Like this, it's like, oh, the beauty's all like, I don't know, like it's all just this facade that, so they don't even like notice that she's not really her. But of course, they do go the route where the mask falls off and like they all just go, it's a monster, shoot the monster. I almost thought we were going to get like a sort of a Frankenstein style ending with them all hunting her and trying to kill her. But no, it's good stuff though. Like it's delightfully absurd. The visuals are great. The practical like effects of the body horror stuff is really good in this back chunk. So yes, not subtle by any means, but really effective in what it's going for. Just a little trimmed down, I think, is all I would say. Is just get it down to 2 hours, and I think that's all I'd really want fixed.
No, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're at the point then. Tim, what's your scene of the movie?
This is tough, but there's a lot of really good stuff here. And geez, I'm trying to think, like, do you go with, like, you know, one of the crazier, like, body horror parts, or, there's also just so much good, like, character stuff in it, too. This is a really tough one to pick. It's always tough when the movie's, like, really good or really bad. It's like, well, there's too much to choose from or too little.
That's true.
To choose from. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just go with the I mean, the transformation sequence is like pretty cool, like when you get this final monster transformation, like at the end, into whatever the final boss or whatever is.
I assume that the monstro or whatever the exact word was. I am assuming that's French for monster to tie into the French cookbook that she was given. Oh yeah,
that makes sense.
That's my guess.
So I mean, there's a lot of really great scenes in the movie, so I feel kind of bad picking this, but I mean, maybe just for the body horror of it, and just the again, like they did a good build up of like, okay, like how crazy is this final thing gonna be? So I guess I'll go with that. But then there's so many scenes in the movie that you could pick.
Yeah, I think I kind of said what it was earlier, but I think I have to go with like her getting ready for the date and then constantly second guessing herself. But one of the details that we didn't mention earlier is that one of the things she notices on one of the moments is that she sees the cleavage on the billboard, and I thought, oh, is she going to go and try and like be more revealing? And she actually went the other way, where she kind of put on a scarf and tried to like hide herself more because she's ashamed of what she's got. And just I thought that entire sequence was just really good, because it was like, this is where like maybe there could be a positive direction where she starts to appreciate who she is, and maybe it'll become a rivalry between the two versions of like, hey, I don't need you anymore, I've kind of grown to accept, I'm taking my life back, and maybe the young version rebels against it. I thought it might go that direction, but instead it was actually almost more poignant that she just kind of kept talking herself out of it. And again, that's not the right phrase, because she doesn't ever say anything. But she gets in her own head and she just keeps not going. She's too terrified and thinks she's not good enough. And I thought that was a really good sequence. So I'll go with that.
It's a powerful moment. And not my favorite scene, but actually one that we forgot to mention that I did think was a good scene though too was I forget if it's the like first guy or second guy that Sue sleeps with. and then like the next day he leaves a note or something and says like, oh, like, yeah, I was too drunk to take my bike home, so I'll come back for it later. And then like when she transforms back to Elizabeth, like she runs into the guy later, but he's like so mean to her.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I just thought that was like a kind of a, again, like a funny scene, but also like a very like kind of poignant scene where it's like, oh yeah, like he's so like into Sue, but then
he's not interested in her at all, and he's actively like, yeah, I think that's actually what motivates her calling the guy, like the guy from earlier, is she has this interaction and she's like, hey, this other guy actually wanted to speak to me, and you know, that's what leads her down that path. So
yeah, and again, it feels like a little like over the top, like it's like, all right, this guy's maybe being like a little too mean to this woman that like didn't do anything to him, like she's just standing in his way a little bit, but again, it's like, you know, selling that point of like, how entitled and stuff people just don't care about you. When,
it's not subtle. Whatever. Certainly, it's definitely not subtle. So MVP, and I guess this is maybe a tough choice because you've kind of got two leads to really pick from. Assuming you're going with an actor.
Yeah, I mean, there is really like a lot of stuff you could do. Like in a way, I could almost like give it to Dennis Quaid, because I feel like he did a really like interesting and funny character. But I mean, I got to give it up for Demi Moore. I feel like it is a two-hander, but I feel like it is a bit more of her movie, and I guess it's also maybe there's like a little meta-ness to it where it's kind of like a comeback for her who. I don't know. I don't know how much stuff she's been doing like over the last couple of years, but this feels like kind of like the first of a big breakout thing in a while.
It reminds me of when Mickey Rourke did The Wrestler. I felt like I hadn't seen him in a while, and then he had this like starring role in like a sort of prestigious little movie. This kind of feels like that for Demi Moore. Yeah,
and Margaret Qualley like did a really good job as well. Like, I don't want to take anything from her, but I don't know. I felt maybe, it's a bit more Demi's movie. So I'll give it up for her. But really, like, great performances all around.
Yeah. I think I lean towards Demi Moore a little bit as well. Just purely, I think, because it is her and she has the more poignant scenes. Whereas Sue, in a lot of ways, is a little bit more one note, but that's almost by design because the whole idea is she's young and doesn't like sympathize with everything that Elizabeth's went through. She kind of dismisses it because she is young and stupid in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to go with Elizabeth / Demi Moore as well. So, all right, Tim, what are you rating The Substance?
Yeah, I mean, we already kind of mentioned it, but I have very little complaints. Again, it could have been trimmed down a bit, but I don't think that's like the hugest problem. Like, there wasn't much of the movie that I thought was like ever boring or that I zoned out. I just think maybe pacing would have been improved a bit. But very minor complaint. I think the performances are great. I think obviously the movie has something to say, while also being very entertaining, also being very funny, also having a interesting premise and just some really great body horror with superb special effects. Sometimes you're worried when you hear about a movie if it's gonna be a little too overhyped, but I think this is a case where I think it lived up for me. So yeah, very few complaints. I think I'll give it an 8.5. Who knows, that maybe upon rewatch, maybe like I'll go up slightly, but I think for now, a very solid 8.5. This was a really good one. We knew it was going to be a heavy hitter. I'm glad we got to it, and it was one that didn't disappoint us, or me. We'll see about you.
I mean, obviously I've been very positive, and I kind of agree that on rewatches or with some time gone by, it might rise a little bit, but I think I'm kind of hovering on the same place. Maybe just going with a flat 8 rather than an 8.5. I like it quite a bit. I think performances are great. I like the style. and it may be one that if I think about it more over time, it might go up a little bit in my estimation, because that happens sometimes. There's definitely some other movies that I've seen recently that I rated a little conservatively when I saw them, but I realised I'd been thinking about them a bit since I'd watched them, and I was like, that actually probably deserves to go up at least half a point for that reason. This could be kind of like that, or I wonder if because it isn't subtle at all, maybe it won't move that much. Maybe it's like, no, it's exactly what it is. What my initial thoughts are will be what sticks, but the body horror stuff is great. It is very entertaining for vast majority of the runtime. Performances are good, direction stylized in a way that makes sense for what it does and how it flips between styles depending on which character we're looking at. Because when we go back to Demi Moore, you always feel the direction slow down again. It's like, all of a sudden it's these long shots, it's these colder, less energetic scenes. Back to Margaret Qualley, upbeat music, bright colors, sunshine. It's like everything about it bounces between. So yeah, I'm going to be a little conservative and say 8 out of 10, but it's the sort of thing that could rise. But even by the time we get to doing our top 10, it may be the sort of thing where by then I'll have thought about it more and let it go up. But that's how I feel at the moment.
I make a mental note, like it might take a little bit of more homework and thinking than I like sometimes, but that might be an interesting, even more Screams episode where we look at movies that have either gone up or down, like after our initial viewings.
Well, we just get a list of all 600 plus episodes and just one by one go, all right, we gave it this score. Do we agree with that still? I mean, if we're doing all 600, we couldn't spend too much time talking about it. It'd just be like a quick all right, Prince of Darkness, we give it this. Do you still agree with that number? No.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why I was saying it might be too much homework. Yeah. If I don't know if we do every movie, but if we can think of
it could
5
be,
or 10 that.
It could be a multi-part thing though. I mean, we could just maybe do okay, well, we'll look at the first 100 and say, all right, stop it when you find one that you disagree with your own score, and talk about the ones that stick out as being different. I don't know. Anyway, that's a potential Patreon thing someday. That's been The Substance, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed our thoughts on it. So we should have at least
two men's thoughts on this movie.
We should at least have another couple of episodes over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll hopefully find time to record some for after that to so there's not any sort of big gap or anything. But we should have at least a few weeks of episodes. We've got a little window here to get some recorded, and we'll be back to regular as soon as we can. But good news is we did also find time to record something for Patreon. Not a bonus episode, but we did get an even more streams done. We did our big 2025 preview of the year. It ended up being 2 hours long, and if all went to plan, it should be out on Patreon the same day this is going out for everyone publicly. So go and check out that on Patreon, and you can support us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get bonuses. Again, the Screams bonuses are a bit in a weird place right now because of the schedule, but they'll be back up and running whenever things gets back to normal, and the other shows have bonuses, so go check out those.
Apologies, we'll get back to the regular bonus stuff soon, but I mean, hey, if you're new to the Patreon, there's a whole year's worth of bonus stuff you can catch up on, and then if not, then you always have the bonus stuff from the other shows. That's always worth listening to as well, so there's still plenty of stuff there.
Yep. Let us know what you thought of The Substance in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Like I said earlier on, we're hoping that next week's episode will be The Monkey, but if we can't do that, if we can't make it to the theater, then you'll have something else instead, so not to worry about it. It'll be another 2024 movie, most likely. But that is us, so thank you once again for joining. We do appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.